The rusted metal gears of the ancient harvester groaned as Sarah Chen ran her fingers across its weathered surface, unaware that this abandoned piece of farm equipment held secrets that would soon thrust her quiet life into the center of a decades-old national security mystery. Within hours, federal agents would descend upon the remote Kansas wheat farm she'd purchased for a fraction of its value, transforming her simple dream of rural living into an extraordinary journey through America's most classified contingency plans. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Sarah Chen stood at the edge of her newly acquired property, breathing in the crisp October air that carried the scent of prairie grass and distant rain. The morning sun painted golden streaks across the neglected wheat fields of what locals still called the Blackwood Homestead, though Emma Blackwood had been gone for nearly 3 years. At 42, Sarah had never imagined herself as a farmer, but life had a way of redirecting even the most carefully laid plans. The county auction had been sparsely attended that September morning, mostly curious locals and a few developers looking for cheap land. Sarah had arrived with her teenage daughter Lucy, clutching the cashier's check that represented most of her late husband's life insurance settlement. The auctioneer, Torres, had seemed surprised when she raised her paddle for the abandoned farm. "Ma'am, you understand this property's been sitting empty for 3 years?" he'd asked during a break. "The house needs work, the equipment's all antique, and the fields haven't seen a proper planting in half a decade." Sarah had nodded, her determination unwavering. After 20 years teaching high school biology in suburban Chicago, after losing Ryan to cancer, after watching Lucy struggle with grief in their cramped city apartment, she needed something different. The listing photos of the Blackwood farm, with its weathered red barn and endless golden fields, had stirred something deep within her. Now, 6 weeks after signing the papers, Sarah surveyed her domain with a mixture of pride and apprehension. The 160-acre property stretched before her, dominated by the 2-story farmhouse with its peeling white paint and sagging porch. Beyond it stood the massive red barn, its doors permanently stuck open, revealing glimpses of forgotten equipment. Within, Lucy emerged from their temporary trailer, still rubbing sleep from her eyes. At 16, she'd initially protested the move with typical teenage fervor, but something about the wide open spaces had begun to work its magic on her too. "Mom, James is here with that tractor part you ordered," she called, gesturing toward the dust cloud approaching on the gravel drive. James Novak, their nearest neighbor at 5 miles distant, had become their unofficial guide to rural living. The 70-year-old farmer had known Emma Blackwood for decades and seemed to feel a responsibility to help the city folks who'd bought her place. His pickup truck rattled to a stop near the barn, and he climbed out with the practiced ease of someone who'd spent a lifetime working the land. "Morning, Sarah, Lucy," he nodded, retrieving a mechanical part from his truck bed. "Thought you might want to get that old John Deere running before winter sets in. Found this at a swap meet in Topeka." Sarah accepted the part gratefully. "I appreciate it, James, though I'm beginning to wonder if I'm in over my head with all this equipment. Half of it looks like it belongs in a museum." James chuckled, his weathered face creasing with amusement. Emma was particular about her machinery, kept everything, even stuff from her father's time. That harvester in the equipment shed? That's from 1952, probably hasn't run since the 70s, but she never could bear to sell it. The equipment shed stood apart from the main barn, a sturdy structure of corrugated metal that had weathered the decades better than most of the farm's buildings. Sarah had briefly explored it during her first week, marveling at the collection of vintage machinery Emma Blackwood had preserved. The centerpiece was indeed the massive harvester, a McCormick Deering model that looked like something from a farming history book. "Speaking of the equipment shed," Sarah said, "I've been thinking about clearing it out." Maybe selling some of the older pieces to help fund the house renovation. Would you mind taking a look with me? I could use an expert opinion on what's worth keeping." James nodded, and together with Lucy, they walked toward the shed. The large sliding door protested as James wrestled it open, revealing the dusty interior packed with decades of agricultural history. Sunlight streaming through gaps in the metal walls, illuminated floating particles, giving the space an almost mystical quality. The harvester dominated the center of the shed. Its red paint faded to a dusty pink, its mechanical complexity a testament to an earlier era of American engineering. Around it sat various other pieces, an old seed drill, a horse-drawn plow that predated even James's farming experience, and several mysterious implements whose purposes Sarah could only guess at. "This is quite a collection," James mused, running his hand along the harvester's side. Emma's father, George Whitfield, bought this harvester new. It was top of the line in its day. These old machines were built to last, all mechanical, no computers or electronics to fail. Lucy had wandered to the back of the shed, where she was examining what looked like an old control panel mounted on the wall. "Mom, what's this thing? It doesn't look like farm equipment." Sarah and James joined her, studying the peculiar installation. It was indeed unusual. A metal panel about 3 feet square, featuring various switches, dials, and what appeared to be radio frequency indicators. The craftsmanship was clearly military or industrial, rather than agricultural. "That's odd," James frowned. "Never seen anything like that in a farm shed before. Looks like some kind of communications equipment, maybe from the Cold War era. Emma never mentioned having anything like this." Sarah examined the panel more closely, noting the heavy-duty wiring that disappeared into the wall. Could it have been for emergency broadcasts? Maybe weather alerts for farmers? Before James could respond, Lucy called out again from deeper. "In the shed. There's something weird back here. The floor sounds different." They found Lucy standing near the rear wall, tapping her foot on the concrete floor. Indeed, the sound was different, hollow, as if there was space beneath. Sarah knelt down, brushing away years of accumulated dirt and straw. Her fingers found the edges of what appeared to be a large metal plate, carefully fitted into the concrete floor. "James, help me with this," Sarah requested, her teacher's curiosity fully engaged. Together, they cleared the debris, revealing a rectangular metal hatch approximately 4 feet by 3 feet, with a recessed handle on one side. James whistled low. "In all my years knowing Emma, she never mentioned anything about a cellar in the equipment shed. This is definitely not standard farm construction." With combined effort, they managed to lift the heavy hatch. Below, metal rungs descended into darkness. Sarah retrieved a flashlight from the workbench and aimed it down. The shaft. The beam revealed a concrete-lined chamber approximately 10 feet deep, with what appeared to be a door at the bottom. "Should we call someone?" Lucy asked, her voice mixing excitement with apprehension. "This seems like something the police should know about." Sarah considered for a moment, her academic instincts warring with caution. "Let's at least see what's down there first. It's probably just an old storm shelter or root cellar." Despite his age, James insisted on descending first, testing each rung carefully. Sarah followed, with Lucy remaining at the top as lookout. The temperature dropped noticeably as they climbed down, the air taking on the distinctive mustiness of long sealed spaces. At the bottom, they faced a military-style door with authorized personnel only, stenciled across its surface in faded yellow paint. A combination lock secured the handle, but age had not been kind to the mechanism. With minimal effort, James was able to force it open. The door swung inward, revealing a sight that made both of them gasp. They stood at the entrance to a substantial underground chamber, approximately 20 feet square, lined with metal shelving and equipment that looked like it had been transplanted from a government facility. Emergency lighting flickered to life automatically, casting an eerie glow over the preserved space. One wall featured a complex communications setup similar to but more extensive than the panel in the shed above. Maps covered another wall, not farm surveys or county plots, but detailed topographical maps of the entire Midwest region, marked with mysterious symbols and coordinates. Filing cabinets lined the third wall, while the fourth held what appeared to be survival supplies. Water containers, sealed food rations, medical supplies, and radiation detection equipment. "This isn't a root cellar," James stated unnecessarily, his voice subdued with awe. "This is some kind of government installation." Sarah moved cautiously into the space, her eyes drawn to a desk in the center of the room. On it sat a leather-bound logbook, a small American flag in a stand, and a framed photograph. She picked up the photo, studying the black and white image of a young woman in 1960s attire, standing next to a man in a dark suit. The woman was unmistakably a younger Emma Blackwood. "Mom!" Lucy's voice echoed down the shaft. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. There's a car coming up the drive. Actually, several cars. They look official. Sarah and James exchanged worried glances. Her heart began racing as she grabbed the photograph and the logbook, instinctively feeling they were important. They quickly ascended the ladder, James pulling the hatch closed behind them as they heard car doors slamming outside. Through the shed's window, Sarah could see 3 black SUVs parked in front of the farmhouse. Men and women in dark suits were already spreading out across the property, their movements professional and purposeful. One figure, a woman in her 50s with short grey hair, appeared to be in charge, directing the others with quiet authority. "Federal agents," James muttered, "but how did they know? We literally just found this place." Sarah's mind raced. The panel on the wall. Maybe it triggered some kind of alert when we opened the hatch. They walked out of the shed, Sarah clutching the photograph and logbook against her chest. The grey-haired woman approached them, her expression professionally neutral but not unfriendly. She displayed credentials identifying her as Dr. Rachel Morrison from the Presidential Records Division of the National Archives. "Mrs. Chen? I'm Dr. Morrison. We need to discuss what you've discovered on your property." Sarah felt a mixture of fear and indignation. "How did you even know we'd found anything? We literally just opened that hatch 10 minutes ago." Dr. Morrison's expression softened slightly. "Mrs. Chen, the facility beneath your equipment shed is part of a classified network established during the Kennedy administration. It's been monitored remotely since it was decommissioned. When the access hatch was opened for the first time in 35 years, it triggered an automated alert in our system." "Kennedy administration," Sarah repeated, her mind struggling to process the implications. What was Emma Blackwood involved in? Another figure approached, a tall man in his 40s who introduced himself as Agent David Keller from the Secret Service. His demeanor was more formal than Dr. Morrison's, his eyes constantly scanning the surroundings, even as he spoke. "Ma'am, we need to secure the site immediately. What you've discovered is part of a continuity of government program that was highly classified during the Cold War. We'll need to debrief you and your companions about what you've seen." James stepped forward, his farmer's stubbornness showing. "Now hold on. This is private property. Sarah bought this place fair and square. You can't just come in here and take over." Agent Keller's expression remained impassive. "Actually, sir, we can. The original deed to this property contains a federal easement that was never disclosed in the public records. Ms. Blackwood's family agreed to maintain this facility as part of a national security program." Sarah felt the ground shifting beneath her feet, both literally and figuratively. Her simple plan to start fresh on a quiet farm was rapidly becoming something far more complex. She looked down at the photograph in her hands, Emma Blackwood's young face staring back at her across the decades. "What exactly did Emma do?" she asked quietly. Dr. Morrison gestured toward the farmhouse. "Perhaps we should continue this conversation inside. There's quite a bit to explain, and I think you'll find Emma Blackwood's story remarkably compelling. She wasn't just a farmer, Mrs. Chen. She was one of a select group of civilians who volunteered to serve as guardians of America's most critical emergency plans." As they walked toward the house, Sarah noticed more vehicles arriving. Technical vans, additional government cars, and what looked like a mobile command post. Her quiet farm was transforming into a hub of federal activity before her eyes. Lucy fell into step beside her, whispering, "Mom, what have we gotten ourselves into?" Sarah squeezed her daughter's hand, trying to project a confidence she didn't entirely feel. "I don't know, honey, but I think we're about to learn something extraordinary about the woman who owned this place before us." The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the wheat fields as they approached the farmhouse. Behind them, agents were already establishing a perimeter around the equipment shed. Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that her life had just taken a turn towards something far bigger than she had ever imagined when she raised her paddle at that county auction just 6 weeks ago. Dr. Morrison held the door open as they entered the farmhouse. "Mrs. Chen, what you've stumbled upon is a piece of American history that's been hidden in plain sight for over 60 years. Emma Blackwood was part of something we called Project Safeguard, and her role was far more important than anyone in Clearwater County ever suspected." As Sarah settled into her own living room, now feeling strangely foreign with federal agents stationed outside, she opened the logbook she'd retrieved from the underground chamber. The first entry was dated October 15th, 1962, written in neat, feminine handwriting. "Received confirmation today. The facility is operational. God help us all if we ever need to use it." The weight of those words settled over the room like a shroud. Whatever Emma Blackwood had been involved in, it was clear that Sarah's impulsive purchase at a county auction had opened a door to secrets that had been buried for decades. As Dr. Morrison began to explain the true history of the Blackwood Homestead, Sarah realized her new beginning was about to become more extraordinary than she had ever dared to imagine. Sarah's fingers trembled as she turned the first page of Emma Blackwood's logbook, the aged paper crackling under her touch. Dr. Morrison settled into the armchair across from her, while Agent Keller positioned himself near the window, maintaining a constant vigil over the increasing activity outside. Lucy sat close to her mother on the worn sofa, and James remained standing, his weathered hands gripping the back of a kitchen chair he'd pulled into the living room. November 22nd, 1963. Sarah read aloud from the second entry. "The world changed today. President Kennedy is dead. Received emergency protocols through the system at 2:47 p.m. Everything we prepared for, everything we feared might happen, suddenly feels terrifyingly real. The responsibility weighs heavier than the harvest equipment in the shed above." Dr. Morrison leaned forward, her academic interest evident despite her official bearing. "That's one of the earliest operational entries we've recovered from the Safeguard network. Most handlers destroyed their logs after decommissioning. The fact that Emma preserved hers is extraordinarily valuable." "Handlers?" Sarah looked up from the logbook. What exactly was she handling? "Presidential continuity plans," Agent Keller interjected, his voice carrying the weight of classification protocols. "During the Cold War, the government established a distributed network of secure sites where critical documents and emergency protocols could be preserved in the event of nuclear attack. These weren't military installations. They were purposely placed in unremarkable locations, operated by civilians who could maintain absolute secrecy." Indostorter. Morrison nodded, adding historical context. The Blackwood farm was designated as Node 7 in the Prairie Network. Emma's father, George Whitfield, was initially approached in 1961. He was a World War II veteran with security clearance from his work on the Manhattan Project. When he passed away suddenly in early 1962, Emma inherited both the farm and the responsibility. Sarah's mind raced as she processed this information. She looked around the modest farmhouse with new eyes, imagining Emma Blackwood living her daily life while safeguarding national secrets beneath her feet. But she was what, 25 years old? How did she manage such responsibility? 26, Dr. Morrison corrected, and she had unique qualifications. Emma had a degree in electrical engineering from Kansas State University, highly unusual for a woman in that era. She'd also worked briefly for Boeing in Wichita on classified aviation projects. When her father died, she was literally the only person who could maintain the technical aspects of the installation. James finally spoke, his voice heavy with disbelief. I knew Emma for 30 years. She never breathed a word about any of this, just talked about wheat prices and rainfall patterns like any other farmer. That was precisely the point, Agent Keller replied. The most effective covers are those lived completely. Emma Blackwood wasn't pretending to be a farmer. She was a farmer who happened to also safeguard critical national security assets. Sarah continued reading through the logbook, her voice filling the quiet room. August 5th, 1964. New protocols arrived via encrypted channel. The authentication codes grow more complex each month. Sometimes I wonder if anyone remembers this station exists, or if I'm maintaining equipment that's already been forgotten by Washington. But duty is duty, and promises to my father aren't easily broken. Lucy, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly spoke up. What kind of emergency plans were hidden here? Like what would happen if there was actually a nuclear war? Dr. Morrison and Agent Keller exchanged glances before the historian responded. Carefully. The specifics remain classified even today, but in general terms, these sites contain detailed plans for reconstituting government operations after a catastrophic event. Constitutional procedures for presidential succession beyond the normal line, communication protocols for reaching surviving military units, economic recovery plans, and critical infrastructure blueprints. Sarah flipped through more pages, noting entries that spanned decades. Emma's handwriting evolved from the careful script of a young woman to the more relaxed flow of middle age. The entries became less frequent after the 1970s, but never stopped entirely. September 11th, 1985. She read, received notification that the Prairie Network is being partially decommissioned, told to maintain the site in caretaker status indefinitely. After 23 years, it feels strange to think this might all fade into history, yet something tells me to preserve everything. Future generations should know what we prepared for, what we feared, what we were willing to sacrifice. That's incredibly prescient, Dr. Morrison observed. Most operators were instructed to destroy their documentation. Emma's decision to preserve these records gives us invaluable insight into the human element of Cold War preparedness. Sarah closed the logbook temporarily, feeling overwhelmed by the magnitude of what they'd uncovered. Why wasn't this all removed when the program ended? Why leave such sensitive material buried on private property? Agent Keller shifted his position slightly. The decommissioning process was complex and incomplete. By the mid-1980s, the immediate threat had diminished, budgets were tight, and many of these sites were simply sealed and abandoned. The assumption was that the locations were so obscure and the security measures so robust that accidental discovery was unlikely. Until someone bought the property and started poking around, James added dryly. Dr. Morrison stood and walked to the window, observing the technical teams now working around the equipment shed. Mrs. Chen, what you've discovered goes beyond historical significance. Some of the protocols Emma was safeguarding have never been properly archived. They represent continuity plans that were developed outside normal channels, contingencies for scenarios that official Washington preferred not to acknowledge publicly. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. What kind of scenarios? Complete collapse of federal authority, foreign occupation of American soil, pandemic scenarios that could incapacitate leadership structures. Agent Keller listed matter-of-factly. The planners in the early 60s imagined every possible catastrophe and tried to prepare for them. Lucy pulled out her phone, then seemed to remember the gravity of the situation and put it away. This is like something out of a movie. Are we in danger? Should we be worried about, I don't know, international spies or something? Agent Keller's expression softened slightly. No immediate danger. These protocols are historical now, though still sensitive. Our primary concern is properly securing and documenting what's been preserved here. Sarah reopened the logbook, drawn to understand more about the woman whose secrets she'd inherited along with the farm. She found an entry from 1972 that caught her attention. May 15th, 1972. The Nixon administration has upgraded our emergency protocols again. Sometimes I think about the irony. I'm preserving plans to protect democracy while questions about democratic governance swirl in Washington. Had to repair the ventilation system again today. This bunker requires constant maintenance, and I can't exactly call a local contractor. Learning skills I never imagined I'd need. She maintained that facility entirely by herself, Sarah asked, impressed despite her bewilderment at the situation. Dr. Morrison nodded. The handlers were remarkably self-sufficient. They received initial training, but ongoing maintenance and security were their responsibility. Emma's engineering background made her particularly effective. James had moved to look out another window, watching the government personnel efficiently working across the property. What happens now? To the farm, I mean. Sarah just bought this place. She's got plans. Agent Keller addressed Sarah directly. We'll need to conduct a complete assessment of the facility and its contents. This process typically takes several weeks. The historical significance means we'll want to preserve as much as possible, but we also need to ensure that any remaining sensitive materials are properly handled. And then, Sarah pressed, then we negotiate, Dr. Morrison said diplomatically. The government has certain rights under the original agreement Emma's father signed, but we also recognize your legitimate ownership of the property. In similar cases, we've found mutually beneficial arrangements. Sarah felt a mixture of frustration and fascination. I came here to start over, to build something simple with my daughter. Now you're telling me I'm sitting on top of Cold War secrets and presidential emergency plans? Dr. Morrison returned to her seat, her expression sympathetic. I understand. This is overwhelming. But consider this. Emma Blackwood managed to balance both lives for over 40 years. She ran a successful farm while fulfilling her classified responsibilities. There's no reason you can't do the same, albeit without the secrecy. Sarah looked at the photograph she'd brought up from the bunker. Young Emma standing next to the official who had presumably recruited her into this shadow world. Who was the man in the photograph with Emma? Dr. Morrison studied the image carefully. That's Deputy Director Harrison Mills from the Office of Emergency Preparedness. He personally oversaw the Prairie Network installations. The fact that he was photographed with Emma suggests she was considered particularly important to the program. There's something else, Agent Keller added, producing a tablet computer. He showed them a scan of an official document. This is Emma's security clearance file. She held a classification level that was extraordinarily high for a civilian contractor. It appears she was involved in more than just maintaining the bunker. Sarah studied the document, noting various code names and project designations that meant nothing to her, such as, she was a communications specialist, Dr. Morrison explained. During certain crisis periods, the Cuban Missile Crisis, the 1973 Arab-Israeli War, various DEFCON elevations, she would have been actively monitoring and relaying critical information. The equipment in that bunker wasn't just for storage, it was an active node in a nationwide emergency communication network. The room fell silent as everyone absorbed this information. Sarah found herself looking at the farmhouse with new eyes. The worn furniture, the creaking floorboards, the kitchen where Emma must have cooked countless meals while knowing that beneath her land lay provisions for national catastrophe. "I want to read more," Lucy said suddenly, gesturing toward the logbook. "Is that okay? I mean, if it's not still classified or whatever." Dr. Morrison smiled. "Under supervision, yes. These materials will need to be properly catalogued, but family members of the property owner have certain access rights during the initial assessment." Sarah handed the logbook to her daughter, watching as Lucy carefully turned to a random page in the middle. The teenager's voice was steady as she read, October 30th, 1979, Halloween tomorrow. I'll hand out candy to the local children as always, playing my role as the spinster farmer who never married. They don't know that I chose duty over personal life, that the secrets I carry made normal relationships impossible. Received new encryption. Keys today. The technology keeps advancing, but the fundamental mission remains. Be ready for the unthinkable. She never married? Sarah asked, feeling a pang of sympathy for this woman she'd never met. No, Dr. Morrison confirmed. Many of the handlers found it difficult to maintain close personal relationships while carrying such classified responsibilities. The isolation was one of the program's unfortunate side effects. James cleared his throat. I remember folks always wondered about that. Emma was attractive, smart, had this successful farm. Plenty of men were interested over the years. She always said she was too busy with the farm to think about marriage. Agent Keller's phone buzzed. He stepped away to take the call, his expression growing more serious as he listened. When he returned, his demeanor had shifted to one of increased urgency. We've just received word that news vans are heading this way. Someone in town must have noticed our presence and called the media. Dr. Morrison, we need to accelerate the initial assessment. Sarah felt her anxiety spike. The media? This is going to be on the news. Not if we handle it properly, Agent Keller assured her. We have protocols for managing public interest in historical discoveries, but it does mean we need to secure the site more quickly than planned. Dr. Morrison stood, becoming more businesslike. Mrs. Chen, we need your cooperation. The immediate priority is cataloging and securing the contents of the bunker. We'd like you to remain involved in the process. After all, this is your property. But we need to move quickly. Sarah felt events spinning beyond her control. What about our living situation? We're staying in a trailer while renovating the house. Are we supposed to just leave? Absolutely not, Dr. Morrison said firmly. You're the legal owner. We'll work around your presence. In fact, having you involved helps establish the narrative that this is a historical discovery rather than an active security situation. Over the next several hours, Sarah watched in amazement as her quiet farm transformed into a bustling excavation site. Technical specialists descended into the bunker, emerging with sealed containers and equipment that looked like museum pieces. Each item was carefully photographed, catalogued, and loaded into climate-controlled vehicles. Lucy proved surprisingly helpful. using her generation's comfort with technology to assist in the digital cataloging process. She worked alongside a young archivist, photographing documents and entering metadata into a specialized database. Sarah found herself paired with Dr. Morrison, reviewing the contents of filing cabinets that had been brought up from below. The documents were a mixture of technical manuals, government protocols, and Emma's personal observations. One folder, marked Contingency Alpha, contained detailed plans that made Sarah's head spin. These are instructions for relocating the federal government to hardened facilities across the Midwest, Dr. Morrison explained quietly. Each node in the network had pieces of a larger puzzle. Only when assembled would the complete picture emerge. Emma knew all of this? Sarah asked, struggling to reconcile the image of a simple farmer with someone entrusted with such monumental secrets. She knew her piece. The system was compartmentalized. No single person outside the highest levels of government had the complete picture. But Emma would have understood the general scope, that she was part of a last resort plan to preserve American governance. As the afternoon wore on, more discoveries emerged from the bunker. Communications equipment that predated modern computers but showed remarkable sophistication. Maps with strategic locations marked in code. And most intriguingly, a sealed metal case that required special authorization to open. Agent Keller returned from coordinating with the perimeter security team. The media presence is growing. We've established a boundary at the county road, but they're using telephoto lenses. Mrs. Chen, we may need to prepare a statement. Sarah felt overwhelmed. I don't even understand what we've found. How am I supposed to explain it to reporters? Keep it simple, Dr. Morrison advised. You purchased a farm and discovered historical Cold War artifacts. The government is assisting in proper preservation. That's all the public needs to know initially. As evening approached, James prepared to leave, but not before pulling Sarah aside. You holding up okay? This is a far cry from what you expected when you bought the place. Sarah managed a weak smile. That's an understatement. I feel like I'm in way over my head. James squeezed her shoulder paternally. Emma Blackwood was a remarkable woman. She managed to balance extraordinary responsibilities with ordinary life. Maybe that's why fate brought you here. You've got that same strength. After James departed, Sarah found herself alone on the porch for a moment, watching the controlled chaos of the government operation. The setting sun painted the wheat fields gold, just as it must have for Emma Blackwood countless times. She wondered what thoughts had occupied the former owner as she watched similar sunsets, knowing what lay beneath her land. Lucy joined her, holding the original photograph of young Emma. Mom, do you think she was lonely, living with all these secrets? Sarah considered the question carefully. Maybe, but I think she also felt purpose. She was protecting something important, even if no one knew it. Kind of like a superhero with a secret identity, Lucy mused. If superheroes wore overalls and drove tractors, Sarah replied, managing her first genuine smile since the discovery. Dr. Morrison appeared in the doorway. We've completed the initial survey. There's more down there than we initially thought. Emma maintained supplementary records beyond the official requirements, detailed journals about the program's evolution, correspondence with other node operators, even technical improvements she developed herself. Ooh, other operators communicated with each other? Sarah asked, intrigued. Through carefully controlled channels, they formed a sort of invisible community, supporting each other through the unique challenges of their roles. Emma's records indicate she was something of a mentor to newer operators in the network. As full darkness fell, portable lights illuminated the work area around the equipment shed. The transformation was remarkable. What had been a neglected outbuilding that morning was now the center of a significant historical excavation. Agent Keller approached with an update. We'll need to maintain a presence here for at least 2 weeks to properly catalog everything. We're prepared to offer compensation for the disruption, and we'll ensure minimal impact on your renovation plans. Sarah nodded, resigned to this new reality. What about the historical designation? Dr. Morrison mentioned something about preserving the site. That's something we'll discuss once the initial assessment is complete, Agent Keller replied. There are various options, from complete preservation as a historical site to partial commemoration that allows normal use of the property. Much depends on what else we discover. As if on cue, a technician emerged from the shed with excitement written across his face. Agent Keller, Dr. Morrison, you need to see this. We've found a secondary chamber. The group hurried to the shed, where the technician led them down into the bunker, in what they had assumed was a solid wall. The team had discovered a concealed door, revealed only when they moved a large equipment rack. The construction is different, the technician explained, shining his light into the newly revealed space. This section was added later, probably in the mid-1970s, based on the materials. Inside the secondary chamber, they found something unexpected. Not more government equipment or official documents, but what appeared to be Emma's personal project. The walls were lined with journals, photographs, and technical drawings. A workbench held various electronic components and half-completed devices. Dr. Morrison picked up one of the journals, reading the first page aloud. The official record will never capture the human cost of constant vigilance. These volumes contain the true story of the Prairie Network, not the protocols and procedures, but the lives we lived in shadow, the sacrifices made in silence. Sarah felt goosebumps rise on her arms. She created her own archive? It appears so, Dr. Morrison confirmed, her excitement palpable. This is unprecedented. Most handlers followed strict protocols about documentation. Emma went far beyond that, creating a comprehensive record of the program from a participant's perspective. They spent the next hour conducting a preliminary survey of the secondary chamber. The personal journals numbered in the dozens, spanning Emma's entire service period. Photographs showed other farms and businesses that must have hosted similar installations. Technical drawings revealed innovations Emma had developed to improve the bunker's systems. This changes everything, Agent Keller admitted. We're not just looking at a single node in the network. Emma Blackwood created an unauthorized but invaluable historical record of the entire program. As they prepared to return to the surface, Sarah noticed a sealed envelope attached to the inside of the chamber door. Her name was written on it in elegant script. For the next owner of Blackwood Farm. With trembling fingers, she opened the envelope, finding a letter dated just 1 year before Emma's death. To whoever finds this chamber, if you're reading this, you've discovered not just the government's secrets, but mine as well. I spent my life serving 2 masters, the land above and the duty below. Neither was ever a burden, both were profound privileges. The official records will tell you about protocols and procedures, about communications equipment and emergency plans. What they won't tell you is about the community of ordinary people who stood ready to help rebuild America if the worst came to pass. We were farmers, shop owners, teachers and mechanics. We were patriots in the truest sense. Not because we wore uniforms or waved flags, but because we quietly prepared for catastrophe while praying it would never come. I never married, never had children of my own. This farm and this duty were my legacy. If you're reading this, you've inherited both. The land will sustain you as it sustained me. The knowledge contained in these walls may help future generations understand the price of peace. Use both wisely. Emma Blackwood, guardian of Node 7, Prairie Network farmer of Clearwater County. Sarah finished reading, tears blurring her vision. The weight of inheritance, both physical and spiritual, settled upon her shoulders. She had bought a farm seeking a simple life, but had instead discovered a profound legacy of service and sacrifice. Dr. Morrison gently took the letter, recognizing its historical value. "This is remarkable, Mrs. Chen. Emma didn't just leave you property, she left you a mission." As they climbed back to the surface, Sarah's mind raced with implications. The simple teacher from Chicago, who had impulsively bought an abandoned farm, was now the custodian of one of the Cold War's most intriguing secrets. The renovation plans she'd made seemed trivial compared to the responsibility of preserving Emma. Blackwood's hidden legacy, Agent Keller helped her up the final rungs. "We'll need to discuss security protocols for the immediate future. The media attention will intensify once word spreads about what we've found. Are you prepared for that?" Sarah looked around at her farm, transformed by revelation, and crawling with government personnel. "I don't think anyone could be prepared for this. But Emma managed it for 40 years. I owe it to her to try." The night air was cool as they emerged from the shed. In the distance, Sarah could see the lights of news vans gathered at the property line, their presence a reminder that Emma's long-held secrets were about to become very public. The quiet anonymity that had protected the Prairie network for decades was ending, replaced by historical scrutiny and public fascination. Lucy approached, her face illuminated by the glow of her phone. "Mom, we're trending on social media. Someone posted photos of all the government vehicles here. People are speculating about everything from UFOs to buried treasure." "If only they knew," Sarah murmured, looking back at the shed that concealed such extraordinary history. "The truth is more remarkable than anything they could imagine." Dr. Morrison gathered the key personnel for a brief meeting. "Tomorrow, we'll begin the detailed cataloging process. Mrs. Chen, we'd like you to be present for the opening of the sealed containers we found. As the property owner and Emma's successor, your involvement is important." Sarah nodded, still processing the surreal turn her life had taken. "What about the farm work? I still have winter preparations to complete, and the house renovation. Can't wait much longer." "We'll work around your schedule," Agent Keller assured her. "This is your property first and foremost. Our investigation will adapt to your needs, not the other way around." As the meeting concluded and people began to disperse for the evening, Sarah found herself alone with Lucy in the farmhouse kitchen. The same room where Emma Blackwood had prepared countless meals while harboring national secrets now hosted a mother and daughter grappling with an inheritance neither had anticipated. "Are you okay with all this?" Sarah asked her daughter. "This isn't what we signed up for when we decided to start over." Lucy considered the question seriously, showing a maturity beyond her 16 years. "It's overwhelming, but also kind of amazing. We're part of something important now, something that matters. Emma Blackwood spent her whole life keeping these secrets to protect people. Now we get to help tell her story." Sarah pulled her daughter into a hug, grateful for her resilience and perspective. Outside, security lights created pools of illumination across the farm, and the sound of generators hummed in the night air. The quiet rural retreat she'd envisioned had become ground zero for a historical revelation that would reshape understanding of Cold War America. As she prepared for bed that night, Sarah found herself thinking about Emma Blackwood's dual existence. By day, a farmer tending wheat fields and maintaining equipment. By night, a guardian of last resort plans designed to preserve American democracy through unthinkable catastrophe. The parallels to her own situation weren't lost on her. A teacher seeking a simpler life, now thrust into the role of historical curator and secret keeper. She picked up the photograph of young Emma one more time, studying the determined expression on the woman's face. There was strength there, but also sadness, the weight of secrets carried alone for too long. Sarah made a silent promise to honor. Emma's legacy while learning from her isolation. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she wouldn't face them alone. The first phase of discovery was complete, but Sarah sensed this was just the beginning. The bunker had yielded its initial secrets, but Emma's personal archives promised deeper revelations about the shadow network that had once spanned the American heartland. Tomorrow would bring new discoveries, more questions, and the challenging task of balancing historical preservation with personal privacy. As sleep finally claimed her, Sarah's dreams were filled with images of wheat fields and hidden bunkers, of ordinary people carrying extraordinary responsibilities, and of a woman named Emma Blackwood, who had shown that true patriotism often wore the humble disguise of daily duty faithfully performed. Dawn broke over Clearwater County with an unusual bustle of activity at the Blackwood Homestead. Sarah stood at her kitchen window, coffee mug in hand, watching as government personnel assembled near the equipment shed. The surreal nature of her situation struck her anew. Just days ago, she'd been planning crop rotations and house repairs. Now, federal agents were extracting Cold War secrets from beneath her wheat fields. Dr. Morrison arrived early, carrying a leather satchel filled with documents. She accepted Sarah's offer of coffee gratefully, settling at the kitchen table with an air of anticipation. "Today, we open the sealed containers," she explained, spreading out a detailed inventory list. "Based on Emma's documentation, these should contain the most sensitive materials, protocols that were eyes only even within the classified program." Sarah studied the list, noting cryptic designations like Continuity Protocol 7 and Project Lighthouse. Each entry included classification levels that seemed almost comically complex in their secrecy. "What exactly are we looking for?" Sarah asked, still struggling to grasp the full scope of what lay beneath her property. Dr. Morrison leaned forward, her academic enthusiasm evident. Emma's personal journals reference something called the Presidential Emergency Action Documents, PEAD for short. These were contingency plans so sensitive that Congress wasn't even informed of their existence. If she truly had copies here... The historian trailed off, but the implication was clear. They might be about to uncover governmental secrets that had remained hidden even from most elected officials. Lucy emerged from her room, already dressed and ready for the day. The teenager had shown remarkable adaptability to their strange new circumstances, channeling her natural curiosity into helping with the documentation process. "Morning, Dr. Morrison," Lucy greeted, pouring herself orange juice. "Did the night shift find anything interesting?" "Several additional storage areas," Dr. Morrison confirmed. "Your shed appears to have been built specifically to conceal the facility. The construction is far more sophisticated than it appears from the surface." Agent Keller entered without knocking, his expression businesslike. "We're ready to proceed with the sealed containers. Mrs. Chen, we'll need you present for the official opening. Chain of custody protocols." Sarah nodded, downing the rest of her coffee. The formality of the process still felt surreal, but she was beginning to understand her role as both property owner and unexpected inheritor of Emma's guardianship. The group made their way to a temporary structure that had been erected overnight, a climate-controlled environment where sensitive documents could be safely examined. Inside, several metal containers sat on examination tables, each bearing official seals and warning labels that had aged but remained intact. "These seals haven't been broken since they were placed," noted one of the technicians, photographing each container from multiple angles. "Whatever's inside has been undisturbed for at least 40 years. Dr. Morrison consulted Emma's journal, reading aloud, "June 15th, 1971, received the Blue Star materials today." The courier seemed nervous, kept checking his watch. These documents carry a different weight than our usual protocols. I've placed them in the deep storage section, containers 7 through 12. May they never see daylight. Agent Keller produced a set of specialized tools. Mrs. Chen, as the property owner, would you like to break the first seal? Sarah hesitated, feeling the weight of the moment. With steady hands, she accepted the tool and carefully cut through the first containers. Seal. The metal lid lifted with a soft hiss, revealing vacuum-sealed packets within. Dr. Morrison's breath caught audibly. Those markings, that's the presidential seal, but with modifications I've never seen before. Working with meticulous care, the team extracted the first packet. Through the clear preservation material, they could see an official document bearing the header, Presidential Emergency Action, Document 12, Constitutional Suspension Protocols. The room fell silent. Even Agent Keller, normally unflappable, showed surprise. This is... Dr. Morrison paused, choosing her words carefully. Historically significant beyond measure. These are the actual PIAD documents. Scholars have known they existed, but the contents have never been confirmed. Sarah felt her mouth go dry. Constitutional suspension. What does that mean exactly? Agent Keller answered carefully. During the Cold War, planners prepared for scenarios where normal constitutional processes might be temporarily set aside to ensure government survival. These documents outlined those circumstances and procedures. They continued opening containers, each revealing more extraordinary materials, emergency succession plans that went far beyond the normal line of presidential inheritance. Protocols for maintaining military command if Washington ceased to exist. Economic plans for post-attack recovery that read like science fiction in their scope. Lucy, who had been documenting everything with her camera, suddenly spoke up. This one's different. She pointed to a smaller container set apart from the others. The label is handwritten, not typed. It says, Emma's Insurance. Dr. Morrison frowned. That's not official protocol nomenclature. This might be something Emma added herself. Inside, they found a collection of materials that made the previous discoveries pale in comparison. Photographs showing high-ranking officials at various prairie network sites. Correspondence that suggested the program's scope was larger than official records indicated. And most shocking of all, a detailed map showing dozens of similar installations across the country, many in locations that had never appeared in any declassified documents. She mapped the entire network, Agent Keller said quietly, studying the map with professional interest. This information was supposed to be compartmentalized. No single person should have known all these locations. Dr. Morrison examined the correspondence, her excitement growing. These letters are from other node operators. They were sharing information, creating their own informal network within the official structure. This is unprecedented. Sarah picked up one of the photographs, recognizing the setting immediately. This was taken right here, in front of the barn. But look at who's in it. The image showed Emma Blackwood standing with a group of men in suits, their faces familiar even across the decades. Dr. Morrison gasped softly. That's Secretary of Defense McNamara, and next to him, that's McGeorge Bundy, National Security Advisor. What were they doing at a small Kansas farm? Agent Keller's demeanor shifted, becoming more guarded. This suggests the Blackwood site was more significant than initially believed. We need to reassess our understanding of its role in the network. They spent the next several hours carefully documenting each item, the implications growing more profound with every discovery. Emma hadn't just maintained a single node. She had somehow become a central figure in the shadow network, trusted with information that should have been far above her clearance level. Dr. Morrison found herself repeatedly consulting Emma's personal journals, looking for clues about how a Kansas farmer had gained such extraordinary access. The answer emerged gradually through diary entries that painted a picture of a woman whose technical brilliance and absolute discretion had made her invaluable to the program. October 3rd, 1975, she read. They've asked me to coordinate communications between the prairie nodes during the upcoming exercise. My improvements to the encryption system have apparently impressed someone in Washington. I'm honored, but also terrified. The weight of secrets grows heavier each year. Sarah listened with mixed emotions. The woman whose property she'd purchased was emerging as a far more complex figure than anyone had imagined. She was brilliant, Sarah murmured. Hidden away on this farm, but brilliant nonetheless. More than brilliant, Agent Keller corrected. She was trusted. In the intelligence community, trust is the rarest commodity. Emma Blackwood earned a level of confidence that few achieve. As afternoon approached, they uncovered what Dr. Morrison declared the most significant find yet. A metal briefcase with diplomatic seals containing documents that appeared to be contingency plans for scenarios beyond nuclear war. Pandemic response protocols, Dr. Morrison read, her voice filled with awe. Biological attack countermeasures, plans for governing during complete infrastructure collapse. These weren't just Cold War preparations. They were preparing for any catastrophic threat to national survival. Sarah studied the dates on the documents. Some of these were updated as recently as 1989. I thought the program was decommissioned by then. Agent Keller's expression was grim. Officially, yes. But it appears certain elements continued operating in deep black status. Emma Blackwood was maintaining active protocols years after the program supposedly ended. The revelation cast new light on Emma's isolation. She hadn't just been keeping old secrets. She had been an active participant in ongoing classified operations until nearly the end of the Cold War. Lucy, who had been quietly photographing documents, suddenly called attention to a personal notebook tucked behind official files. "Mom, look at this. It's not government stuff. It's Emma's own notes about the other operators." The notebook contained what amounted to personality profiles and contact protocols for dozens of other civilians across the network. Emma had created her own intelligence, files on her counterparts, complete with assessments of their reliability, technical capabilities, and personal circumstances. She was running her own intelligence operation, Agent Keller observed, with something approaching admiration. Unofficial, unauthorized, but remarkably comprehensive. Dr. Morrison turned pages with growing excitement. She documented everything: personality, conflicts, security breaches that were covered up, operators who struggled with the psychological burden. This is a sociological goldmine. Sarah found herself drawn to entries about operators who had cracked under pressure. Emma wrote with compassion about those who couldn't maintain the double life, who had been quietly removed from the program and sometimes institutionalized to protect security. November 14th, 1976, lost another one today. Marcus from Node 17 had what they're calling a nervous breakdown. His wife found him trying to broadcast emergency codes on his ham radio. They've taken him for treatment. I pray I never reach that breaking point, but the isolation grows harder each year. At least I have the farm. The wheat doesn't care about nuclear war. The human cost of the program became starkly apparent through Emma's observations. These weren't just faceless government operatives. They were ordinary people carrying extraordinary burdens, often to the detriment of their mental health and personal relationships. As they neared the bottom of the containers, they found materials that shifted the narrative once again. Technical blueprints and specifications that showed Emma hadn't just maintained her equipment, she had significantly improved it. "These modifications are ingenious," said one of the technical specialists studying circuit diagrams. She increased transmission range by 300% while reducing power consumption. Some of these innovations predate similar military developments by years. Agent Keller made a call on his secure phone, stepping outside for privacy. When he returned, his expression was troubled. "I've just spoken with headquarters. The technical innovations we're finding, some of them are still classified as current technology." Emma Blackwood developed solutions that the military is still using, just with modern components. The afternoon sun slanted through the windows as they opened the final containers. These held materials that seemed different from the government. Documents, more personal, yet somehow more secretive. "These are from other installations," Dr. Morrison realized, examining photographs and documents. Emma was collecting intelligence from across the network, but why? The answer came in a sealed envelope marked "For Posterity." Inside, Emma had written what amounted to a mission statement. The government will classify and compartmentalize. They'll hide the human story behind walls of secrecy, but someone needs to preserve the truth, not just the protocols and procedures, but the reality of what we've sacrificed for national security. I've appointed myself that historian. If you're reading this, you've inherited not just secrets, but the responsibility to ensure our story is told. Sarah felt the weight of Emma's self-appointed mission settling onto her shoulders. She created her own archive because she knew the official record would never capture the full truth. Dr. Morrison nodded slowly. She was right. Official. History's focus on policy and strategy. Emma documented the human experience of living with ultimate secrets. As they prepared to close operations for the day, Agent Keller received another call that changed his demeanor entirely. He gestured for Dr. Morrison and Sarah to join him outside, away from the others. "We have a situation," he said quietly. One of the network locations Emma documented on her map, Node 23 in Nebraska, just responded to an automated query our technical team sent out. The facility there is still operational. Sarah felt her heart skip. "I thought these were all decommissioned decades ago." "So did we," Agent Keller admitted. "But it appears Emma's network was more extensive and more persistent than anyone in Washington realized. We need to reassess everything." Dr. Morrison's academic excitement was palpable. "This changes the entire historical narrative. We're not just documenting a Cold War relic. We might be uncovering an active shadow network that's been operating independently for 40 years. The implications were staggering. Sarah looked back toward her farmhouse, then to the equipment shed that had started this entire journey. "What does this mean for me, for my property?" Agent Keller's expression softened slightly. "We'll work with you, Mrs. Chen. But this discovery has national security implications that go beyond historical preservation. Emma Blackwood may have been the unofficial coordinator of a network that's still partially functional." As evening approached, Sarah found herself back in the bunker, now illuminated with proper lighting and filled with examination equipment. She stood where Emma must have stood countless times, looking at the communications equipment that had connected this isolated farm to a network of similar installations across America. Lucy joined her, having finished her documentation duties for the day. "Mom, do you think there are people out there still monitoring these sites like Emma did?" Sarah considered the question carefully. "Based on what we found today, I think Emma created something that outlived its original purpose. She connected people who were isolated by secrecy, gave them community within the shadows." Dr. Morrison entered the bunker, carrying a final discovery from the day's work. "Sarah, I thought you should see this immediately. We found it in Emma's personal effects. A letter addressed to you specifically." Sarah's hands trembled as she took the envelope. Her name was written in Emma's careful script, Sarah Chen, future owner of Blackwood Farm. How could she have known my name? Sarah asked, bewildered. Look at the date, Dr. Morrison pointed out. This was written just 2 weeks ago. Sarah's mind reeled. Emma Blackwood had died 3 years ago. She opened the envelope with shaking fingers, finding a letter in handwriting that looked identical to Emma's. Dear Sarah, if you're reading this, then you've discovered not just my bunker, but my true life's work. You bought this farm seeking a new beginning. Instead, you've inherited a responsibility that spans generations. The network I helped create still exists, maintained by those who understood that some duties transcend official orders. We are the watchers in the wheat fields, the guardians of last resorts, the keepers of plans everyone hopes will never be needed. Your arrival was not accidental. The farm chose you as it chose me. The technical improvements you'll need are in container. 17. The communication protocols are in the blue binder. Trust Agent Keller. He's one of us, though he doesn't know I know. Welcome to the real Prairie Network. We've been waiting for you. Emma. The letter fell from Sarah's nerveless fingers. The implications were impossible, yet the evidence was undeniable. Someone had written this letter recently, someone who knew Sarah would buy the farm, someone who claimed to be Emma Blackwood. Agent Keller picked up the letter, his face paling as he read. This isn't possible. We confirmed Emma Blackwood's death 3 years ago. Dr. Morrison looked between them, her academic certainty shaken. Then who wrote this letter? Who knew Sarah's name before she even decided to buy the farm? The questions hung in the air as darkness settled over the wheat fields. What had begun as a historical discovery was transforming into something far stranger and more complex. The bunker's communications equipment hummed softly in the background, as if waiting for signals from installations that supposedly no longer existed. Sarah walked to the main console, running her fingers over controls that Emma had touched countless times. The surface was worn smooth by decades of use, yet the equipment remained functional, maintained by someone who understood its importance. What if, Lucy said softly, Emma faked her death? What if she's out there somewhere, still coordinating this network? The possibility seemed absurd, yet no more absurd than a letter addressed to Sarah by name, written before she'd even heard of Clearwater County. Agent Keller was already on his phone, requesting additional resources and verification protocols. Dr. Morrison pulled Sarah aside. Whatever's happening here goes beyond normal historical discovery. Are you prepared for what we might uncover? Sarah looked around the bunker, at the equipment that connected to unknown locations, at the documents that revealed a shadow network spanning decades, at the letter that suggested impossibilities. She thought about the simple life she'd sought when she bought the farm, then about the extraordinary woman who had preceded her. Emma managed this responsibility while running a farm and protecting these secrets. Sarah said finally, I came here to start over. Maybe this is what starting over really means. Not running from complexity, but embracing a purpose larger than myself. As they secured the bunker for the night, the communications equipment suddenly crackled to life. A series of tones echoed through the chamber, not random static, but a clear pattern. Agent Keller rushed to the console, his training taking over. That's an active handshake protocol, he said, incredulous. Something's trying to establish communication. They watched in silence as the equipment responded automatically, decades-old programming still functioning. Lights blinked in sequence, and then a message appeared on one of the ancient displays. Node 7, acknowledged. Welcome back to the network. Await further instructions. Sarah felt the world shift beneath her feet. The farm she'd bought, the simple life she'd sought, the historical discovery that had disrupted everything, all of it was transforming into something far more extraordinary. Emma Blackwood's legacy wasn't just historical. It was alive, active, and apparently expecting Sarah to take her place in a network that defied everything they thought they knew about Cold War history. As they climbed back to the surface, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched, not by government agents or curious locals, but by something more subtle. The wheat fields whispered in the evening breeze, and somewhere in the darkness she imagined Emma Blackwood was smiling, knowing her carefully laid plans were finally coming to fruition. The next morning would bring new questions, deeper mysteries, and the growing realization that Sarah had stumbled into something that would challenge not just her understanding of history, but her perception of reality itself. The Prairie Network was more than a Cold War relic. It was a living system, and Sarah Chen had just been activated as its newest guardian. The communications console continued its rhythmic pulsing throughout the night, casting an eerie glow across the bunkers. Contents. Sarah hadn't slept, her mind racing with implications of the message they'd received. As dawn broke over the wheat fields, she found herself back underground, studying the equipment with new understanding. Agent Keller arrived early, his typically composed demeanor showing signs of strain. "We've been monitoring the signal patterns all night," he reported. 12 other sites have responded to the activation sequence. They're scattered across the Midwest, all at locations Emma documented on her unofficial map. Dr. Morrison joined them, carrying coffee and wearing the same clothes from yesterday. "I've been reviewing Emma's technical notes. She didn't just improve the existing systems. She created an entirely parallel network that could operate independently of government oversight." Sarah examined the console's display, where coordinates and identification codes scrolled continuously. "You're telling me that Emma Blackwood, a Kansas farmer, built her own national defense network?" "Not built," Agent Keller corrected. "Evolved. She took the existing infrastructure and transformed it into something self-sustaining. When the official program ended, her shadow network continued. The revelation recast everything they'd discovered. Emma hadn't been just a participant in a Cold War program. She'd been an architect of its survival beyond governmental control. Lucy descended into the bunker, her laptop in hand. "Mum, you need to see this. I've been tracking social media mentions of our location, and there's something weird happening." She showed them her screen, where a map displayed dozens of red dots across the central United States. "These are all reports of unusual activity at abandoned farms or old industrial sites. They started appearing right after our signal went active last night." Agent Keller studied the map intently. "These locations correspond to Emma's network nodes. The activation here triggered responses across the entire system." Dr. Morrison pulled up Emma's journals, finding an entry from 1987. "The government thinks they've shut us down, but they never understood what we really built. Not just bunkers and radios, but a living network of patriots who understand that some threats transcend political administrations. When the time comes, the Prairie Network will awaken on its own." Sarah felt the weight of realization. She planned this. Emma knew someone would eventually discover this bunker and trigger the reactivation. "But why?" Lucy asked. "The Cold War's been over for decades. What's the point of maintaining these sites?" The answer came from an unexpected source. The communications console chirped and a new message appeared. "Stand by for secure transmission. Authentication required." Agent Keller moved to respond, but the system rejected his access codes. It wanted something specific, something only the designated operator would know. Sarah remembered the letter that had impossibly known her name. "The blue binder," she said suddenly. Emma's letter mentioned protocols in a blue binder. They located the binder among Emma's personal effects, finding it filled with handwritten codes and procedures. Sarah entered the primary authentication, A sequence, her fingers moving across the old keyboard with surprising confidence. The console accepted her input, and the screens filled with new information. Personnel files appeared, not from the 1960s, but recent entries. Some photos and biographical data for people currently monitoring the network nodes Emma had established. These are active operators, Agent Keller breathed. There's a whole organization still running this network. Dr. Morrison studied the profiles. Teachers, farmers, small business owners, ordinary people in ordinary places, just like the original program. But who's coordinating them? The answer came as the primary display cleared and a video feed activated. The image was grainy but unmistakable. An elderly woman sat in what appeared to be another bunker, her silver hair pulled back in a practical bun, her eyes sharp with intelligence. "Hello, Sarah," the woman said, her voice carrying a familiar cadence. "I've been waiting for you to find your way here." Sarah's blood ran cold. She knew that voice, had been hearing it in her mind since reading the personal journals. "Emma? But you're dead?" "That's what the records say," Emma Blackwood smiled. "Death was the only way to truly disappear from government oversight. Node 7 needed new blood, someone unconnected to the original program. You were carefully selected." Agent Keller stepped forward. "Mrs. Blackwood, I'm Agent David Keller with—" "I know who you are, David," Emma interrupted. "Your grandfather was part of the original network. Richard Keller, Node 15 in Iowa. He'd be proud to know you're helping preserve what we built." Keller's professional composure cracked. "My grandfather was a hardware store owner. He never mentioned anything about—" "Of course he didn't. That was the point." Emma's attention returned to Sarah. "You wanted to know why the network continues? Look at the world today. Cyber attacks, biological threats, infrastructure vulnerabilities. The dangers have evolved, but the need for resilient backup systems remains." Dr. Morrison found her voice. "You've been running an unauthorized intelligence network for decades." "That's patriotic," Emma suggested. "We're not spying on Americans or undermining the government. We're maintaining capabilities that might someday mean the difference between recovery and collapse. The Prairie Network isn't about power, it's about preservation." Sarah struggled to process the surreal situation. "Why me? Why did you choose me for this?" Emma's expression softened. "Because you understand loss and renewal. Because you came here seeking purpose, not profit. And because your background makes you ideal for what comes next. My background as a teacher, your background in biology," Emma corrected. "Check container 19, the one marked with the medical symbol." They hadn't opened that container yet. Having focused on the communications equipment and government documents, Lucy ran to retrieve it while Sarah maintained the video connection. "The threats we prepared for have changed," Emma continued. "Nuclear war seems less likely now, but biological dangers, natural and artificial, are increasing. Your expertise will be crucial." Container 19 revealed something unexpected. Not Cold War documents, but recent scientific reports, medical protocols, and biological hazard response plans. The materials were current, some dated within the past year. Dr. Morrison examined the documents with growing amazement. These are pandemic response protocols that go beyond anything in the public health system. Distributed medical supply caches, isolation procedures for rural communities, communication networks that could function during quarantine conditions. Sarah picked up a detailed manual on viral mutation patterns. The annotations were recent, the analysis sophisticated. This is graduate-level epidemiology. Who prepared these? Network members with relevant expertise, Emma explained through the video link. Doctors, researchers, public health officials who understand that centralized responses can fail. We've spent decades building redundancy into America's survival. Systems. Agent Keller had been quietly making calls, his expression growing more concerned. I need to report this to my superiors. An unauthorized network of this scope already is reported, Emma interrupted. Check with Director Harrison at the Continuity of Government Office. The Prairie Network has been in grey status since 1991, officially non-existent but unofficially tolerated. We provide capabilities the government can't publicly maintain. Keller's phone rang immediately. After a brief conversation, his face showed complete bewilderment. Director Harrison confirms. He says to continue historical documentation and avoid interfering with legacy systems. How is this possible? Emma smiled, because sometimes the most effective security systems are those that officially don't exist. We learned that from you, Agent Keller, from the government's own playbook. Sarah felt the room spinning as paradigms shifted. So what happens now? Am I supposed to just join this network, pretend to be a farmer while secretly monitoring emergency communications? Not pretend, Emma corrected. Be a farmer. The best cover identities are lived truths, but also be ready. Train with the equipment, learn the protocols, connect with other nodes, and prepare for possibilities everyone hopes will never occur. Lucy, who had been absorbing everything with remarkable calm, asked the question that had been nagging at Sarah. What about the other Emma, the one who owned the farm and died 3 years ago? Emma's expression grew sad. My sister. She maintained the farm after I died in 1992. When she passed away 3 years ago, we knew it was time to bring in fresh leadership. The network needs renewal every generation. The pieces fell into place. 2 sisters, 1 public and 1 hidden, maintaining both farm and network across decades. It was a deception so complete that even government records hadn't detected it. Dr. Morrison set down the pandemic protocol she'd been reading. This network, it activated now for a reason, didn't it? There's something coming. Emma nodded gravely. Not a specific threat, but a pattern of vulnerabilities, infrastructure attacks, supply chain disruptions, biological risks. The indicators suggest we're entering a period of increased instability. The Prairie Network needs to be operational before crisis hits, not after. Sarah thought about the quiet life she'd sought, the simple existence she'd imagined when buying the farm. That dream seemed impossibly distant now. Yet looking at the faces around her, Lucy's determined expression, Dr. Morrison's academic fascination, even Agent Keller's grudging respect, she realized she wasn't facing this alone. If I agree to this, Sarah said slowly, what exactly am I committing to? Emma leaned forward. To be what I was, a guardian of last resorts. Maintain the farm, live your life, but also preserve capabilities that might someday matter more than anyone imagines. The technical training takes 6 months. The full integration into the network happens gradually. And if I refuse, then the farm remains just a farm. The bunker gets sealed. The network routes around this node. But Sarah, Emma's voice carried decades of conviction. You didn't find this place by accident. Everything in your life has prepared you for this moment. Sarah looked at Lucy, seeking her daughter's reaction. The teenager straightened, showing maturity beyond her years. Mom, remember what you told me after Dad died? That we had to find new purpose, new ways to contribute. The parallel was undeniable. They'd come to Kansas seeking renewal, and they'd found it, just not in the form they'd expected. Sarah took a deep breath, feeling the weight of decision. I'll do it, she said finally, but on my terms. The farm remains a real farm. Lucy finishes school normally, and I want full transparency about network operations. Emma smiled. Agreed. Welcome to the Prairie Network Node 7. The video connection established links to other sites, and faces appeared on multiple screens, the modern inheritors of Emma's shadow network. Men and women from across the heartland, each maintaining their own piece of America's ultimate backup plan. Agent Keller closed his phone, after another conversation. Headquarters has classified this entire discovery at the highest levels. Officially, we found historical Cold War artifacts. Unofficially, I've been assigned as liaison to the network. Dr. Morrison laughed, surprising everyone. I came here to document history and discovered it's still being written. This will require an entirely new approach to academic study. Over the following hours, Emma provided initial training through the video link. The communication protocols were complex, but logical, building on systems developed across decades. Sarah's scientific background helped her grasp the technical aspects quickly. As the day progressed, other revelations emerged. The network had evolved beyond its original purpose, becoming a mutual support system for isolated operators. They shared agricultural innovations, medical knowledge, and technological improvements. It was democracy in its purest form, citizens organizing to protect their communities outside official structures. Lucy proved adept at the modern communication interfaces, bridging the gap between Emma's analog systems and contemporary digital networks. It's like the ultimate online community, she observed, except with national security implications. By afternoon, Sarah was operating the console independently, establishing connections with other nodes and learning their regional responsibilities. Each site had specialized capabilities based on local resources and operator expertise. Some focused on medical supplies, others on communication redundancy, still others on agricultural sustainability. Agent Keller received authorization to share certain classified materials that provided context for the network's continued relevance. Official continuity planning has gaps, he admitted. Budget constraints, political considerations, bureaucratic limitations. The Prairie Network fills those gaps with resources the government can't publicly acknowledge. Dr. Morrison documented everything, creating a record that would remain classified but preserve the network's history for future generations. This is living history, she said, not just artifacts in a museum, but an active system adapting to current needs. As evening approached, Emma announced she needed to sign off. Other nodes require attention, and you need time to process everything. But Sarah, remember, you're not alone. The network supports its own. The screens went dark, leaving Sarah standing in the bunker that had transformed from historical curiosity to operational facility. The equipment hummed softly, waiting for her commands. "So what now?" Lucy asked. Sarah looked around the chamber, then up toward the surface where their tractor sat idle. "Now we bring in the wheat harvest, and we learn how to be guardians hidden in plain sight." They climbed the ladder to find the sun setting over golden fields. The farm looked exactly as it had that morning, yet everything had changed. Sarah understood now why she'd been drawn to this place, why the auction had seemed so important despite her lack of farming experience. Agent Keller prepared to leave, his team packing up the mobile command post. "I'll be in regular contact," he told Sarah. "Officially as part of historical preservation oversight, unofficially as your connection to government resources the network might need." Dr. Morrison gathered her notes and recordings. "I'll need to revise my entire understanding of Cold War history. This network represents a parallel narrative that reshapes how we view civilian participation in national security." As the government vehicles departed, leaving only discreet monitoring equipment, Sarah stood with Lucy in the yard of their new home. The farmhouse needed repairs, the fields required attention, and winter preparations couldn't wait. But beneath, their feet lay capabilities that might someday help preserve American society through unimaginable challenges. "Are you scared?" Lucy asked. Sarah considered the question honestly. Terrified, but also purposeful. Emma was right. Everything in our lives led to this moment. They walked toward the house as stars appeared overhead. Tomorrow would bring the mundane tasks of farm life alongside the extraordinary responsibility of network participation. Sarah Chen, biology teacher turned farmer, had become the newest guardian in a legacy stretching back through the Cold War to the present day. The Prairie Network waited silently beneath American soil, maintained by ordinary people preparing for extraordinary circumstances. Emma Blackwood's vision had survived her supposed death, evolved beyond its original design, and found new life in an immigrant's daughter seeking a fresh start on Kansas wheat fields. As Sarah prepared dinner in the farmhouse kitchen, she felt the presence of those who had stood watch before her. Emma and her sister, the operators whose names filled the network roster, the countless Americans who had quietly served in shadows to preserve light for darker days. The antique harvester in the equipment shed stood as silent testimony to the ingenuity of previous generations. Like the network it had concealed, it represented continuity through change, adaptation to new challenges while preserving core purposes. That night, as Sarah lay in bed listening to the prairie wind, her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Welcome to the family. Node 12 here. If you need anything, equipment, advice, or just someone who understands, we're here." The network endures. She smiled in the darkness, feeling connection to something larger than herself. The simple life she'd sought had evolved into a complex purpose she'd never anticipated. Yet somehow it felt right, as if the land itself had chosen her to continue a vital tradition disguised as ordinary existence. Downstairs, the hidden entrance to the bunker remained concealed beneath the equipment shed's floor. The communications equipment waited patiently, ready to serve if called upon. Above ground, wheat stalks whispered in the Kansas wind, hiding secrets that stretched across the heartland and through the decades. Sarah Chen had bought an abandoned farm seeking a new beginning. She'd found instead an ancient responsibility, wrapped in modern purpose. The Prairie Network lived on, its guardians hidden among the amber waves of grain, vigilant and ready for whatever challenges the future might bring. As sleep finally claimed her, Sarah dreamed of underground chambers connected by invisible threads, of ordinary people carrying extraordinary burdens, and of Emma Blackwood's knowing smile as another link in the chain took up the watch. The network endured, as it always had, in the space between official history and necessary truth. The Blackwood Homestead slept peacefully under starlight, just another farm in the Kansas countryside. But beneath its soil lay capabilities that might someday make the difference between catastrophe and continuity, tended by the newest member of America's most secret society of patriots. The antique harvester had given up its secrets, the underground room had revealed its presidential emergency plans, and Sarah Chen had found her unexpected destiny. The Prairie Network continued its vigilant watch, ready for whatever tomorrow might bring. 6 months had passed since Sarah Chen's extraordinary discovery beneath the abandoned wheat farm. The winter wheat she'd planted according to Emma Blackwood's detailed agricultural notes now rippled like a green ocean across the restored fields. The antique harvester, once a dust-covered relic, had been carefully restored to working condition, though its primary secret remained hidden beneath carefully maintained panels. The farmhouse renovations were complete, transforming the weathered structure into a comfortable home that still preserved its historical character. Sarah stood on the wraparound porch she'd rebuilt, watching the sunrise paint the fields gold, while her secure communication tablet displayed overnight reports from the Prairie Network. Node 12 in Nebraska had detected unusual seismic activity, not natural earthquakes, but the signature of underground testing. Node 23 in Missouri reported disruptions in regional communication systems that followed patterns Emma's protocols had predicted decades ago. The network hummed with quiet activity, its operators sharing information through channels invisible to conventional monitoring. Lucy emerged from the house, already dressed for school, but carrying a sophisticated radio scanner that would have puzzled her classmates. Morning brief shows 3 new members inducted into the network this week, she reported, pouring herself coffee with the casual efficiency of someone who'd adapted completely to their dual life. The teenager had embraced their unexpected role with remarkable adaptability. Her cover as a typical high school student remained intact, but she'd also become the network's youngest technical specialist, bridging Emma's analog systems with modern digital security protocols. The basement room they'd converted into a homework space doubled as a sophisticated monitoring station. The European networks made contact again last night, Lucy continued, checking her encrypted messages. They want to establish formal protocols for international coordination. Emma's authentication codes are still valid with their systems. Sarah nodded, reviewing the overnight intelligence on her tablet. The Prairie network's influence extended far beyond what they'd initially understood. Emma hadn't just built a domestic emergency system. She'd established connections with similar shadow networks worldwide, creating a civilian intelligence web that operated entirely outside government channels. Agent Keller's vehicle approached on the gravel drive, arriving for what had become a weekly briefing disguised as historical preservation consulting. His official reports to Washington carefully maintained the fiction that they were simply documenting Cold War artifacts, while his actual role had evolved into something far more complex. "Morning, Sarah, Lucy," he greeted them, accepting coffee gratefully. His suit remained government standard, but the briefcase he carried contained network protocols rather than bureaucratic paperwork. "Director Harrison sends his regards. The joint exercise with nodes 15 through 30 was successful. Your improvements to the communication protocols reduced transmission time by 40%. Sarah smiled modestly. Her scientific background had proved invaluable in updating the network's technical capabilities. The biological monitoring systems she'd implemented, building on Emma's pandemic preparations, had already detected 2 potential disease outbreaks before they reached public health radar. "Any word on the infrastructure probe from last week?" she asked, referencing a coordinated attempt to test vulnerabilities in the Midwest power grid that the network had identified and helped neutralize. Keller's expression grew serious. "NSA traced it to servers in 3 different countries, but the network's early warning gave utilities time to patch the vulnerabilities. Official channels moved too slowly. Again, this had become a recurring theme. The Prairie network's distributed structure and lack of bureaucratic constraints allowed it to respond to threats faster than traditional agencies. What Emma had, built as a Cold War backup, had evolved into an agile detection and response system for modern challenges. Dr. Morrison arrived an hour later, her academic schedule flexible enough to accommodate regular visits. She'd officially taken a sabbatical to write a book on Cold War agricultural communities, but her real work involved documenting the network's ongoing evolution. "I finished analyzing Emma's journals from the 1980s, she announced, spreading documents across the kitchen table. She predicted exactly what we're seeing. The shift from nuclear threats to cyber warfare, biological risks, and infrastructure attacks. Her network design anticipated these changes by decades." Sarah studied the passages Morrison highlighted. Emma's foresight seemed almost prophetic, but it stemmed from her deep understanding of systemic vulnerabilities. She'd built flexibility into the network's core structure, allowing it to adapt as threats evolved. Lucy's laptop chimed with an incoming encrypted message. "Node 7 to all stations," she read aloud. "Mom, that's us. The authentication system wants you to initiate a network-wide alert." Sarah moved to the primary console they'd installed in the reinforced basement. Her fingers moved across the controls with practiced ease, entering the daily authentication codes that confirmed her identity to the system. The screen filled with data from across the network, status reports, threat, assessments, and operational readiness indicators. Network integrity at 97%, she reported. All primary nodes operational, secondary nodes showing green across the board, tertiary fallback systems. Wait, she frowned at an anomaly in the data. Node 47 is requesting emergency authentication. Node 47 wasn't on any of their maps. According to the network database, it didn't exist, yet here it was, transmitting valid authentication codes through Emma's carefully designed protocols. Ghost node, Keller said quietly. Emma mentioned them in her final briefings, sites so secret that even the network doesn't officially acknowledge them. They only activate under specific conditions. The console screen cleared, replaced by a video feed. An elderly man appeared, his face weathered but alert. Behind him, banks of equipment suggested a facility even more sophisticated than Sarah's. A bunker. Node 47 acknowledging, the man said formally. Authentication, Lighthouse Protocol 7. I need to speak with the current Node 7 operator regarding contingency Omega. Sarah's training kicked in. Node 7 responding. Operator Sarah Chen, please verify secondary authentication. The man smiled slightly. Emma said you'd ask for that. The answer is in container 23, the one you haven't opened yet. She called it the last surprise. They'd catalogued all the containers months ago, but container 23 had been sealed with a time-locked mechanism that wouldn't open until... Sarah checked the date and felt her pulse quicken. Today. The lock would release today. Lucy, bring container 23 from the archive room, Sarah instructed, maintaining the video connection. Her daughter disappeared downstairs, returning minutes later with a metal case they'd set aside months ago. The electronic lock showed green for the first time. Sarah opened it carefully, finding a single manila folder marked Omega Contingency and a small device that looked like an advanced encryption key. The folder contains your authorization, the man on screen continued. The device activates a part of the network Emma kept dormant for 30 years. We are the strategic reserve. Nodes positioned near critical government facilities, ready to provide backup communications if primary systems fail. Sarah opened the folder, finding documentation that took her breath away. Emma hadn't just built one network. She'd constructed multiple layers, each designed for different scenarios. The prairie network they'd been operating was just the visible portion of a much larger system. Why activate now? Keller asked, his professional instincts engaged. The man's expression grew grave. Because our monitoring suggests a coordinated campaign to compromise critical infrastructure. Not a single attack, but a pattern of probes testing response times and vulnerabilities. Emma's predictive algorithms indicate a 70% probability of major action within 6 months. Dr. Morrison had been furiously taking notes. This aligns with patterns from Emma's historical analysis. She identified cycles of institutional vulnerability, periods when bureaucratic complacency creates opportunities for systemic attacks. Sarah inserted the encryption device into her console. New displays activated, showing nodes scattered across the country in locations that made strategic sense, near military bases, government facilities, communication hubs. The strategic reserve wasn't just a backup network. It was a shadow nervous system for national infrastructure. All strategic reserve nodes. This is Node 7, Sarah transmitted, using protocols she'd just learned from Emma's documentation. Initiate, readiness, verification, authentication, Omega 77. Responses flooded in from hidden sites across the nation. Retired military officers, former intelligence analysts, technical specialists, all people Emma had recruited into the deepest levels of her network. They'd been waiting, some for decades, for this activation. As the morning progressed, the scope of Emma's true vision became clear. She hadn't just been preserving Cold War communications capabilities. She'd been building a distributed intelligence network that could detect and respond to threats faster than any government agency. The brilliance is in the structure, Keller observed, studying the network maps. No central authority to compromise, no bureaucracy to slow responses, no political considerations to complicate decisions, pure operational efficiency. Lucy had been analyzing data patterns from the newly activated nodes. "Mum, look at this. The Strategic Reserve has been passively monitoring electronic communications for years. Not content, just patterns and anomalies. They've built a baseline of normal activity that lets them detect subtle changes." Sarah felt the weight of expanded responsibility. Running Node 7 had been challenging enough. Now she found herself at the operational center of a network far more extensive than anyone had imagined. "I need to ask," Dr. Morrison said carefully, "is this legal, a private intelligence network operating without government oversight?" The man on screen, who'd identified himself as Colonel William Nash, U.S. Army retired, answered, "We operate under the same principle as neighborhood watch programs or civilian emergency response teams. We observe, we prepare, and we stand ready to assist legitimate authorities. We don't conduct operations. We provide capabilities that might be needed in crisis." The distinction was legally crucial. The network gathered intelligence but took no direct action. It maintained emergency capabilities but didn't deploy them without proper authorization. Emma had threaded the needle between patriotic service and unauthorized activity. As the day wore on, Sarah found herself coordinating with node operators across the expanded network. Each brought specialized expertise: cybersecurity, medical response, agricultural sustainability, energy infrastructure. Together, they formed a comprehensive safety net beneath America's visible systems. Emma called it democratic resilience, Colonel Nash explained during a secure conference call with all primary nodes. The idea that citizens have not just the right, but the responsibility to ensure their nation can survive catastrophic challenges. By afternoon, the network had identified 3 specific vulnerabilities in national infrastructure that required immediate attention. Following established protocols, this intelligence was passed through Keller's official channels to relevant agencies. The beauty of the system was its ability to provide actionable intelligence while maintaining complete anonymity for its sources. Lucy returned from school to find the farmhouse transformed into a subtle command center. Secure communications. Equipment hummed quietly in the basement while her mother coordinated with nodes across the country from what appeared to be a simple home office. "Big day?" the teenager asked, with characteristic understatement. Sarah smiled, remembering the morning 6 months ago when they'd first discovered the bunker. "You could say that. Emma's full network is active for the first time in 30 years. Turns out we inherited more than we knew." That evening, as the prairie network settled into its expanded operational status, Sarah stood again on the porch, watching the sunset paint the wheat fields gold. The antique harvester sat in the equipment shed, its secrets now fully revealed, but its symbolic importance undiminished. Dr. Morrison joined her, holding 2 cups of tea. Remarkable woman, Emma Blackwood. She saw threats coming that we're only now beginning to understand. She also saw the solution, Sarah replied. Not bigger government programs or more complex bureaucracies, but ordinary people taking extraordinary responsibility. Agent Keller emerged from the house, ending a call with his superiors. Washington is impressed with today's intelligence yield. Directors from 3 agencies want to establish formal liaison relationships with the network. Unofficially, of course. Sarah nodded. The network would cooperate with legitimate authorities while maintaining its independence. Emma's design ensured that no single point of failure, government or private, could compromise America's emergency response capabilities. As night fell, the Prairie Network hummed with quiet activity. Operators across the country maintained their normal lives, farming, teaching, running businesses, while monitoring the invisible threads that connected them. Each node was a backup for others, each operator ready to step forward if called upon. Sarah thought about the journey that had brought her here. A widowed teacher seeking a fresh start had stumbled upon a legacy that redefined her understanding of patriotism and service. The simple farm life she'd imagined had evolved into something far more complex but infinitely more meaningful. Lucy appeared at her side, tablet in hand. Node 33 is reporting unusual electronic signatures near a nuclear facility in Tennessee. They're requesting network analysis. Sarah straightened, duty calling. Route it through our pattern recognition system. Alert nodes 30 through 35 to increase monitoring. And wake Colonel Nash. His nuclear expertise might be needed. As she moved inside to coordinate the response, Sarah paused to look back at the wheat fields. Somewhere out there, Emma Blackwood, either in reality or in spirit, had to be satisfied. Her network lived on, evolved and adapted for new challenges, tended by a new generation of guardians. The antique harvester had yielded its ultimate harvest, not just the presidential emergency plans hidden in its secret compartment, but a living network of citizens prepared to defend their nation from the shadows. Sarah Chen, once a simple biology, in teacher, now stood watch over capabilities that might someday make the difference between catastrophe and continuity. The Prairie Network endured, its operators hidden among ordinary Americans, its true strength lying not in technology or government, authority, but in the determination of citizens who understood that democracy's survival sometimes required unofficial guardians. Emma Blackwood's legacy lived on through Sarah and hundreds of others, each maintaining their small piece of a vast protective web. As Sarah began analyzing the Tennessee anomaly, coordinating responses from multiple nodes while maintaining the appearance of a simple Kansas farmer, she smiled slightly. The abandoned wheat farm had indeed provided the new beginning she'd sought, just not in any way she could have imagined. The network screens glowed softly in the basement command center, displaying the quiet vigilance of democracy's hidden defenders. Above ground, the Kansas wind whispered through the wheat, carrying secrets that stretched across a continent and through generations of Americans who had chosen to serve in silence. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new threats to detect and deflect. But tonight, the Prairie Network stood ready, its newest guardian fully embracing the remarkable inheritance that had come disguised as an abandoned farm. Sarah Chen had found her purpose, and America's most secret society of patriots had found its future. The Blackwood Homestead slept peacefully under starlight, just another farm in the Kansas countryside. But beneath its soil and across the nation, Emma Blackwood's vision lived on, ordinary people performing extraordinary service, ensuring that whatever challenges might arise, the network would endure, and with it, the nation's ability to weather any storm. The last surprise had been revealed, the full network activated, and the antique harvester's deepest secret finally understood. Not just emergency plans hidden in an underground room, but a living system of resilience that adapted, evolved, and stood ready for whatever tomorrow might bring. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.